Thank you so much for joining us on ADHD Wise Podcast. If something in this episode has helped you, made you think, or given you language for something you've been living with, you can support the podcast by following or subscribing, leaving a review, or connecting with ADHD Wise on YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Every share, review, comment, and follow helps the podcast reach more people and helps us create conversations and resources that support neurodivergent people, families, and professionals. Thank you. Your support really does mean the world.
Yeah, it's that whole exploration of things, isn't it?
Me personally, sorry, carry on. I interrupted you and I should have done that. Sorry, yeah. I was. That's a proper ADHD moment right there. In a real conversation in real life, but and I've forgotten what I was going to say. So there we go. That's exactly a little bit of real life ADHD between ourselves there.
That's all right. That can go in the bloopers.
Welcome to ADHD Wise Podcast. I'm Jannine Perryman, and this is a space for open conversations about ADHD and neurodiversity, bringing together lived experience, professional insights, and the questions that help us move forward. Wherever you are in your journey, you are welcome here. Hello and welcome to another edition of ADHD Wise Podcast. My name is Jannine, and today I am joined by Ryan Swain, and I have been following Ryan for as long as I have known that ADHD is part of my family dynamic. In fact, he was one of the first influences that I got to 12 years ago, I think was the first time I came across something of yours, Ryan.
Yeah, a long time ago, yeah.
About 10 years ago, when I started to make this more of my job. So I am so excited to have this conversation with you, and I love your energy. It was just like just chatting to you just as we were kind of like getting to go online, and you're just you, and I just bring in the authentic. So hello, Ryan.
Hi, Jannine. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm really, really good. Yeah, it was 12 years ago, and it really is no lie when I say to people and say to things, especially the media, that I was talking about ADHD not long before anybody else, but in a time which nobody else really wanted to own that label or talk about that label, because it was incredibly difficult to do so without being judged or without being tarnished with a derogatory term or label. Do you know what I mean? So, but times have kind of moved forward. Whether times have got better or not are two different things. However, I do think people have become a little bit more open-minded about what ADHD is, and obviously the abbreviation ADHD, the acronym, and autism, and all the other neurodivergents to go with them are frequently sort of discussed, whether it's in the education system, in occupations, in day-to-day life. We see them, we hear about them. So yeah, I do think times have changed a little bit more since I was first talking about it.
For the better and the worse, right?
Yeah, and at the moment, I think things are just getting worse and worse and worse. Like I mentioned before we started recording, I think it's a bit of a Wild West in terms of everything, really. Glamorization, misinformation, exploitation even. So, yeah, but equally, there's a lot of like-minded people like myself and you and others that are out there on the front line, you know, sort of speaking up, advocating and educating people on ADHD. So
Matt Gutwell was sharing some stuff on LinkedIn, and he was talking about that only 46% of the information that's shared on social media is actually well researched and accurate. Only 46%.
That's
so people
scary.
Are more likely to hit. It's really scary. And I'm just, thank you to Matt. I have invited him to come on the podcast. I don't know whether he will or not, but I have invited him because I actually think that was a real nugget of information, because it's just in that moment, you just sort of sit back and you go, the serious work of sharing good information, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because the likes of you and me who've been in this field for as long as we have, we understand the significance of that. And I think there is this popularization of media and social media presence that is misrepresenting things, but the government does it. So how can we can't hold social media to account when we can't hold the news to account, or even the government to account, because their information isn't accurate either.
No, it's a lot of it is all to do with algorithms and clickbaiting and just basically trying to do whatever they can just to get people engaging with the content, irrelevant whether it's fact or fiction. They don't really care about the consequences. Obviously we do, hence why we're here talking about ADHD and the things moving forward. But yeah, it comes with damaging consequences for everybody, whatever it's about. It comes with damaging consequences. So I've never been a fan of it, and I'll never support it. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you have an influence, there, I believe there is a responsibility to use it appropriately. We see ourselves getting sidelined because somebody else has got more popularity, and it's just like, and at what expense? So I think it's just such an interesting one, and I think that when this podcast and the one I set up prior to the sort of like part of the reason for doing it was, you know what? We cannot and should not want to stop other people from talking about their experiences. But if we can create some sort of balance by way of providing good information, then that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And I think the way to do that is for people who are authentically sort of compelled to want to help others to work together with other like-minded people like we're doing right now. We're talking about whatever we're going to be talking about regarding ADHD, neurodiversity, the spectrum. So why can't other so-called influencers, creators, people who are supposed to care about other like-minded people do the same thing? I don't understand why there's this kind of boundary between them and you. To me, that doesn't make any sense. If you genuinely care about people and about the condition, then you will speak to as many people as you can about it and get them talking and give them information that is accurate and factual and beneficial. And I think that's really, really important. But there's also a lot of people that are seeing the trend behind the label, and it is a very worrying factor that it's become this kind of sensationalistic kind of thing, which popularist. Do you know what I mean? It's easy for someone to start speaking about it, and irrelevant to whether it's positive or negative, it's about getting the hits rather than actually the quality of the content, quantity over quality. And I don't think that's very good in my opinion.
I completely agree. And I love that we've talked about it, but we haven't singled anyone out, because I've also seen other people single other people out. And that's not something that we're doing either, because ultimately we're talking about the collective responsibility to do a good job here. But I think also that whole call to action, that when you see somebody's social media content, if it's useful, great. I'm really glad that it's useful for you, but do recognise that it's more likely to be inaccurate. So keep encouraging people to have a critical mindset around it and saying, and I said because the podcast that's gone out the week before this one, I said on that, if you receive social media content and you're not sure, tag me on it, forward it to me, and no matter what platform it hits, I'll tell you to what extent it's accurate or not. Because I think that is my small if that plus this podcast is my small contribution to addressing misinformation without attacking anybody, because we're not into attacking anybody either, because people are allowed to share their story, etc. But I'm really wanting to encourage a critical evaluation as people go through.
The best work is the work that I'm doing on the front line right now for ADHD and ADHDers of all generations, advocating, educating, speaking up, and speaking the truth, most importantly. I represent people. I speak up for them in Parliament. I speak up for them on the street. I speak up for them in the education system. And I'm sort of playing devil's advocate at the minute, because I'm trying to listen to what this education system has to say. So the teachers, the special educational needs coordinators, workers, etc., the staff, the parents. I'm trying to listen to the children, both with the conditions and without the conditions. I'm just trying to paint a bigger picture of where this is all going wrong for everybody, rather than being a defensive kind of campaigner and advocate. Not that there's anything wrong with having that fire and passion, but the problem with being defensive is that you only see one side, whereas I like to see all sides of the argument. And I think that's how we're going to make bigger and better changes moving forward, is trying to understand everybody's differences, to agree on it and move forward together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And Ryan delivers free. Is it across the country, or is it just in the northeast? Training
It's
for schools.
across the country, yes, across the country.
But you have a tour coming up, and I think that is the northeast, or is that also across the country?
Yeah, you heard it here first. I've not really spoken about this on any other things at the moment. So, yeah, You, Me and ADHD is a talk, a motivational talk, but it's also an education. So basically, it's not just your kind of cliche speaking keynote speech kind of thing. It's all from the heart, lived, raw, real experience, which I can tailor to all generations and all age groups. And basically, it's trying to get people debating, discussing, and opening up, most importantly, about what ADHD actually is, and how it presents itself, manifests itself in infancy right through to adulthood. Because I think there's this kind of misinformation and this popular misconception that, if as an adult of a child, it's okay, you might be struggling at school at the moment, but you'll grow out of that and it'll go away. It'll get easier as time goes on. Well, it doesn't. It gets 50 times worse. And do I think it gets any easier to live with as you get older? Not whatsoever. I think it's harder to process and deal with now as an adult than it was when I was a child, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just raw and real. And you do manage to thrive despite that. But we spoke before about sort of like the difficulty with the superpower narrative, because actually both of us, although we're doing reasonably well in our careers, and I would say are decent role models, if you had seen me almost in tears this weekend at the fact that my time blindness has had a negative impact on my partner and my colleagues, I was in bits because I've double booked in a way, and I was just like, and I got really upset about it. And the thing is, that's how I live my life. ADHD is no picnic, and we shouldn't be pretending that it is. And I think something similar, I bet you can tell sort of like similar stories. I'm not going to go into mine, but I'm sure you could tell similar stories.
I could sit telling stories all day, yeah. I don't feel comfortable with how glamorous ADHD's become, and that's been done by people sharing their own personal journeys and stories through books or audiobooks, or even just speaking on things like TikTok and social media and whatnot. Not that I have anything, against their stories or against their way of doing it, but what I do have a problem with is the misinformation, just because I'm very open-minded in the fact that not everybody's maybe going to resonate with me getting permanently excluded from school, ending up in pupil referral unit, then on an EOTAS scheme to finish my education, to be let out into the big wide world. I just don't feel comfortable with, glamorizing it and sensationalizing it and playing on it. It's become like a trendy kind of label to have, and I don't think that's a good thing. ADHD is a neurobiological condition, scientifically proven. It's not something you can just pick and choose if you've got it. Yeah, you can show signs and symptoms, but it's easy because we've normalized what ADHD is, and people will often say, "Oh, you've definitely got ADHD. It's ADHD. It's ADHD. It's AUDHD." But what people often miss is the fact that you are often born with ADHD, like I say, neurobiological condition. And like I mentioned previously, it shows in infancy and it stays with you right through adolescence into adulthood. And the symptoms get harder to live with, and they get deeper and darker and more profound, obviously. But at the same time, usually they are reoccurring and pretty consistent, as damaging as they may be. I just find it baffling how many people sort of pick and choose sometimes that, I talk a lot, so I must have ADHD. Well, yeah, you maybe just like talking doesn't necessarily mean say you've got ADHD. Do you know what I mean? This is what I try to educate people on, is the fact that it's a list of reoccurring signs and symptoms that create the label, not just one particular thing. Do you know what I mean? So, but again, we've normalized it to say, oh, he talks a lot, so he must have ADHD, or he can't sit still, so he must have ADHD. It's all those things combined that create ADHD, not just one symptom.
Yeah, so the terminology for that would be chronic and pervasive. So it is
Exactly, yeah.
ever present and it's in the way of you thriving. And if that isn't the case, you don't need an assessment, because you only need an assessment if it's in your way. Because to get a diagnosis, it has to be useful to get a diagnosis. So a clinician has to be gathering all the evidence and then laying it all out and saying, yes, this person shows enough symptoms for me to say that they score high on this cross sector of traits, and there's quite a lot they have to hit, but they also that this person needs a diagnosis, because without one they're going to carry on struggling with this and this negative outcome.
Exactly,
whereas if they get a diagnosis, they may be able to do this and this, which should improve their life. If it isn't about improving life, then you don't need a diagnosis. I know lots of people who can be pretty sure they're ADHD but don't feel like they need to be assessed. They're just like, okay, I can recognise this is what's going on for me. I can recognise going through my childhood, if I'd realised that, then this, that and the other. And some people want that diagnosis and some people don't. And I think both of those things are completely valid. And I also think that self-identification is valid as long as it's not via those social media influencers who we know are more than 50% wrong. So it's like there is that whole thing. Is it an intelligence? So we do lots of screening, for example, and it's like that's going to give you a reasonably high degree of accuracy. So, there's a difference between that and doing a little sort of 10, 12 questionnaires online. That's not really it either. So yeah, it's that whole exploration of things, isn't it? Okay, so there's two threads I wanted to pick up on there. One is, so for me, my co-occurring conditions include dyslexia. One of your co-occurring conditions is Tourette's, which you're diagnosed as well.
I don't like the word. It does something to me. It triggers me off. That and TICs, I call them notorious TICs. That's my way of coping with it, a coping mechanism. But yeah, the word tics, it triggers something off in me. They come on very frequently when I'm very stressed or I'm tired. When I'm tired, they're terrible. And again, it's all to do with triggers. I know the triggers. They've become more prevalent and more predominant in the last 5 years. But when we've done the research and we've presented that for a diagnosis, and we've done that with the GP and the neurologist, both of them have said, because your archived information and research is so extensive, we can put that down to being Tourette's, but you probably wouldn't have noticed it as a child, or maybe your ADHD's masked some of the signs and symptoms of the Tourette's, where people have maybe looked at him and thought, oh, he's twitching, he's moving, because he's got ADHD, when in fact it's a motor tic and it's a way of my brain doing something to my body that's involuntary. So again, having the two conditions can sometimes, they sort of fight each other really and blend into one.
Well, they probably go against each other sometimes and aggravate each other. So probably moderate each other sometimes.
Exactly. But for the outside neurotypical person, it's easy for them to just think it's just one thing when it could be both. Do you know what I mean? I think that's something to bear in mind for some ADHDers, because a lot of ADHD people who I meet, I'm not speaking for everybody because everybody's different, but I know a lot of them fidget a lot and twitch a lot, and whether it's them physically doing it or involuntary doing it, they twitch or move around in some way, shape or form. So Tourette's, when I was doing my work on a bit of research on Tourette's and ADHD, the two are very closely linked things, I think, in terms of neurology.
Because I can think of one lad in particular that I coach, and he's diagnosed ADHD, and he definitely has problems with his impulse control. But I was like, I'm sure there is compulsions in there. I'm sure there's tics and Tourette's in there as well. So you put then the impulse control, and then you put in the compulsion aspect. So for that particular lad, he's going to me, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how much control you've got over this other than to keep your stress levels low. Because for me, every time you mention it is when your stress levels are high. It's not when you're calm. And I don't know that I don't know this ends with impulse. I think this is more.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Yeah, I know what the triggers of it are. And I'll be honest with you though, I have found since my diagnosis 2 years ago with it officially, I do feel it harder to accept and comprehend than ADHD. You know, ADHD is something that I've always known I've had right from a small age because I've been told that and obviously been diagnosed with that and whatever else. So I could accept that. Whereas this has been a little bit, because it's been so late, I found it a little bit more difficult to sort of comprehend it and accept it. But I'm getting there and I'm learning lots about it and I'm very interested in it, that sort of hyperfixation to want to learn about your condition is there for me with Tourette's and motor tics. But I will just say my tics I have the head jolt and the kind of involuntary movements and sometimes some throat, clicks and clucks and whatnot. But they're very mild in comparison to some people's Tourette's. I think that's another thing that needs mentioning because I think people often assume Tourette's with this kind of swearing and shouting out incredibly intrusive thoughts and abuse and whatnot. And it's really not like that. Not for everybody anyway. So.
No, it isn't. And there are different types. And I probably will try to put together a speaker who can speak directly on, an expert who can actually speak on that sort of more from a more professional perspective. But I really appreciate you sharing your personal perspective because you can bet there will be at least one person or at least one parent who sits there and goes, oh, at that information. And that's why we're doing this, because we want those wake up moments where you go, oh my gosh, that's what's going on. And this is based on lived experience. But if Ryan has said anything that I thought was different to what was the case, then I would have absolutely corrected that. But there's, that's what Ryan has said there. That is correct, and that's kind of like the way these things are experienced.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think people, it's different. There certainly is different levels of it. And how motor tics manifest and develop are two totally different things to what we think they are.
Yeah. Well, Tourette's isn't all about the coprolalia, is it? Which is the coprolalia is the term
bizarrely,
for the swearing tics.
Peculiarly, I was in hospital with something totally different, which we won't talk about on this right now. But and the neurologist came to see me. It was to do with medication, and I had a condition. If you want to find out any information, just jump on my socials. It's all on there. I've been raising quite a lot of awareness around it. It's called serotonin syndromes, where your body, your brain produces too much serotonin. The serotonin from the medication elevates in your system and it attacks your nervous system. And basically you have a seizure and can fall into a coma and potentially die. And I nearly died a few weeks ago. And the neurologist came round. The medication that I was on, I won't mention for legal reasons of things, but it was given to me to relax my muscles so I didn't tic as badly, or the motor tics that I have are involuntary, so I don't know when what they're going to do or how they're going to manifest or present themselves. So sometimes they can catch you off guard and you can be really relaxed and then you pull a muscle in your neck or you pull or you hurt your arm or whatever. So I started taking this medication to try and just relax my muscles a little bit and relax my mood. And obviously I got this serotonin syndrome from that. And the neurologist came round to speak to me and he openly admitted that he doesn't really know a lot about Tourette's. And he's a neurologist. So I just don't think the information on Tourette's we're quite there yet. I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of not just this country, but the whole world. It's something which is there's very little known about it really.
Do you feel there is more going on for you or for your child, but you are unsure where to start? At ADHD Wise, our neurodiversity pathway offers a cross-neurotype assessment for adults, children and young people. Cross-neurotype means we look across a range of neurodevelopmental profiles and differences, including ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, language and communication, sensory processing, executive function and regulation. The pathway includes WiseClear, which helps collect detailed information from you about everyday experiences, strengths and challenges. It also includes Creos, which gives us an evidence base based on activities that you perform online that shows us things like attention, memory, reasoning, and cognitive processing. We then build this together with a semi-structured interview so that we can triangulate the information and build a clearer picture of what may be going on for you. The aim is to help you know where you are, what might be contributing to the challenges that you or your child are having, and deciding on next steps, whether that be a diagnostic or whether that be support in school or in work, coaching, adjustments, or simply better understanding yourself or your child. The neurodiversity pathway is about clarity, direction, and helping people be better understood. You can find out more at adhdwise.uk and look for the neurodiversity pathway. The limitations of what we're talking about today is Tourette's as a co-occurring to ADHD, and we'll save the expert stuff for another day. But Ryan, I'm so grateful for you for sharing that, because I think that the people need to hear. The other thread that I wanted to pull on is that you and I both had a tough time when we were at school in different ways. I don't know how old you were when you got your diagnosis, but, with undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD, we both had a tough time of it in school. And you were talking about the fact that you'd obviously had difficulties, you got expelled from school and then you were in a PRU. And I know that you've got a real passion for wanting to change mainstream education to include more people, like us, because it's misunderstandings.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I just don't think we need to put the boundaries up. We don't need to do that. Segregating people is only going to cause divide one way or another. I appreciate that people learn differently. People digest information differently. I also appreciate that not everybody is good around other people and things. But equally, we need to sort of be looking more to be more inclusive, be more educated on how we handle situations in the education system, and also be more understanding of what these conditions and labels actually are, and preaching and teaching that to not just the young people with the conditions, but also the young people around them that share the classroom with them on a daily basis, and their parents and the parents' parents, and so on and so on. It's been proven, if you educate the person on the condition, then they're going to have a level of understanding what's to come ahead of them. It's when people don't know what's ahead, then all the problems start occurring. And that's been proven numerous times with certain things. And ADHD comes with major consequences. I've said it before and I'll say it again. And these are my words, it's my opinion. But unharnessed ADHD is a killer. It really, really is. It leads to a path of destruction, and it takes you on a journey which is, an uphill battle, really, for everything, all sectors of your life. And if it isn't reined in and harnessed and used and understood, then it's going to create issues and problems in relationships, in occupations, through your education, even out on the street, so.
Yeah, absolutely. All those things, all those vulnerability factors.
Yeah, vulnerability, yeah.
Yeah, and we are actually really, really vulnerable. Some of the things that I experienced in my childhood that have manifested to extra stuff as an adult, those vulnerabilities go into, and the consequences are more dire when you're an adult usually than when you are a child. So it's like, that's one of the reasons I think you were saying that it's sort of like, it's kind of like worse in adulthood, and that's because the consequences are worse.
You
mess up as a child, then you're still going to have a home and a roof over your head and a dinner in front of you. You mess up as an adult and you could lose like everything, and you could lose everything for your children as well. So it's like, it's a big deal.
Exactly. And then somewhere in the middle of that is your sort of adolescence, where you can get embroiled and sort of introduced to experimentation and meeting new people and doing all these things where there's pressure around that. So acting on impulse is going to propel you into that, to doing stuff. I only did a talk a few weeks ago in Hull at an alternate education hub. And it was an aspirations day, and the Humberside police were there as well, and we got into a really good conversation, and they were giving me some staggering details and facts and statistics on neurodivergent people that they get through the criminal process. And, they said to me, you could be interviewing who you think is a perpetrator when in reality they're a victim, and an example of this is ADHD people, undiagnosed or diagnosed, can often get into things which they have no control over. And basically, you could be in a really important conversation and you're in it for a few moments and then you get hyperfixated on something else, or your mind takes you elsewhere. But then people are still thinking that you're in that conversation, so the lights are on, but nobody's home. But in reality, they speak to you and you can hear all this noise and you're just going, yeah, just agreeing to anything that they say, basically, and not processing the information that's being given to you, which creates issues and problems. And I think that's where I went wrong as a youngster. I'd just say yes to everything and not actually think about the consequences, or actually process the information that had been given to me about what it was that they wanted me to do. So I would just do it. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no worries.
That's such an interesting one, and I'm going to pull on one of my little stories there that I haven't actually shared ever, so exclusive here as well. When I was 17 and I was working in a pub, don't even go there, because clearly I shouldn't have been working in a pub at 17. Well, not serving drinks, but I was, and they did know I was 17, but they don't exist anymore, so it's fine. I can tell you that now. And there was a conversation after work one day about burning the place down. And there were people living upstairs. There was a conversation and I'm just like listening, like this was some sort of like fantasy sort of thing. And I'm just kind of like chatting away with it, just kind of going, wow. And just thinking it's kind of like this elaborate story, like we're making up this sort of like this dramatization things. And I have no interest in this sort of stuff at all. But then it turns out they were actually planning to do this. And at that point, I'm like, no, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
And I ended up losing my job and the place I was staying just before my 18th birthday. And I spent my 18th birthday homeless, sleeping on the streets in Luton, because I had said no to an arson attack. And it's just, you just look at the whole thing and you're just like, I could just as easily have been swept along. And I just think there but for the grace of God, not that I'm particularly religious, but there but for the grace of God, because, yes, of course I said no, but depending on your level of desperation and where you're sitting and what you've smoked or what you've drunk and what influence you're under is literally the difference between somebody falling the wrong side and the right side of things.
And now we live in a culture where it's either, like you've mentioned previously, social media influencers, right through to being under the influence of experimentation for recreational drugs or alcohol and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of dangers there, and people often talk about the concoction of things, mixing things and doing things, and that's another real worry in my opinion. The fact that these medicinal drugs for these conditions are handed out now quite easily. But then the actual, I personally do think they are. Again, it comes back to not understanding the bigger picture. I think it's becoming easier to say, like I mentioned, it's ADHD, it's ADHD. Is it autism? Is it ADHD? I can't really work it out, so it's just both. Instead of actually getting to the root of the real problems, and that's my opinion. But I'm just speaking on behalf of what a lot of people think. And I think it needs more of a thorough approach, understanding, treating people like humans rather than just tick boxing everything and just be like, oh, it's got to be that. what about actually understanding it? How ADHD presents itself on paper statistically to how ADHD is to live with, in my opinion, are totally two different things.
Okay, so I wouldn't agree that ADHD medication is too easily available, because actually only about a third of people with a diagnosis are actually taking medication. It's only ever part of the solution. And it can be very, very difficult to get hold of. I would also say that some people are on a ridiculously high dose, and I can sort of like in conversations with them, I'm like, hang on a second, let's have a think about this, and might be worth reporting this back to your prescriber, because like lots of the conversations like that. So there definitely are instances, and obviously just with that sort of like the hat on, that we have to make sure things are accurate, that statistically it's difficult to get hold of medication, and some people are not able to access it when they should be able to, and some people possibly have too higher dosage. I think both those things is safe and accurate to say, so just kind of like putting the thing on there. But I totally agree with you with regards to the fact that we're in this pressure cooker situation where we are struggling to manage a lot of the time. And there's a couple of people that I know and love who probably smoke too much weed.
Yes.
And really
self-medicating it's never the right way, honestly. Not that I've ever done it. I've never touched a recreational drug in my life. However, I will just come back in on that and just, I totally agree with what you've said. What I was trying to say was more along the lines of when I say it's easy to, I don't mean it's easy to get hold of, but I think it's been distributed to people far too easily, in the respect of, without going down other routes and channels of looking at the bigger picture of what the problem might be. The thing is, now you get diagnosed with ADHD or autism or ADHD, and the first thing they want to do is give you medication. Or try and get you on some kind of medication. Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. I didn't mean it's easy as in you not have to wait for it. I meant it's easy as in they're willing to pass it over to you straight away, rather than actually explore other alternate provisions, routes, and help.
Pills don't give you skills. Pills don't give you skills, do they?
Exactly.
And we do need to learn to live with this. Yeah.
And I always say when I'm doing the talks and the workshops and things that, if you're looking at the piece of paper, i.e. the diagnosis or the pills and the tablets to take this thing away, it's never going to go away. That is just one plaster over a big wound. You need to get inside the wound and understand it from within to be able to move forward. Yes, I'm not saying a diagnosis doesn't help people. Of course it does. It answers a lot of things for some people. It gives them validation. It gives them an understanding as to why maybe things before haven't worked out, etc. Tablets can help some people. I don't believe it helps everybody, because everybody's different. It can help some people, but equally it can also make other people worse. I had an awful experience with medication. I was on a Concerta first. That didn't really work out for me. It just stripped me, made me into a shell of a person. And then I got put on antamoxetine, and I had a violent allergic reaction to antamoxetine, which should have killed me. Hospitalized for 3 weeks under antamoxetine. And I've never been right since that. That happened in 2010. So yeah, I've never been right since. But equally, I will just say, just because medication it doesn't work for me, doesn't necessarily mean to say it isn't going to work for you. But I do truly believe there are better ways of handling ADHD than just relying solemnly on one thing. Do you know what I mean?
So medication does work for me, but I can't take it because I have Lyme disease. And Lyme bacteria has a bit of a party on ADHD medication, on ADHD stimulants. Yeah. So I can't take medication, but it does work on me, but I can't do it because I would end up with a Lyme flare.
You just highlighted something there, which I want to come in on because I think it's really important. Stimulants. Yes, exactly. ADHD, majority of the medication, not that I'm pharmaceutical because I'm really not, and obviously not medically trained. However, if you do your research on certain medication for ADHD, they are majority of them are stimulant medications to have the diverse effect on whatever's going on to level things out.
Yeah, they quieten you down if you're ADHD.
Yeah, they quieten you down. That's my take on it, okay? However, I know many people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, both adult ADHD and their children have been diagnosed with ADHD, that are taking these stimulant medications, but this so-called diverse effect isn't applying to them. And they're actually feeling worse on it because it's making them erratic and it's making them not sleep and it's making them basically bouncing off the walls. So my question is have they just ticked a few boxes on the tick box thing to be told that they've got ADHD, to be given this medication for it not really to work? Or is...
Oh, can I talk about that for just a couple of minutes and just kind of like fact check that?
Yeah, I want you to come fact check this. Yeah. These are my takes on it. Yeah.
Okay, so with the stimulant-based medication, there are two types. There's your lisdexamfetamine, and there is your methylphenidate. Your methylphenidate is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So if you have low dopamine, you can take methylphenidate and it will increase the dopamine that's available to you, but it doesn't give you any more. It just means you have access to what you naturally made for longer. So you are able to access your own dopamine before it gets hoovered up by neurons. That's a particular type of ADHD that you can't scan brains for at the moment, but wouldn't it be amazing when we can? And then there's the other type, which is your lisdexamphetamine type, so and your dextroamphetamine type. So they provide synthetic dopamine as well as locking it in. Okay, so those are your two different types. So this type here, your lisdexamphetamine, if you're not producing enough, you need this one. If your reuptake is too fast, you need the methylphenidate. And that's one of the reasons that they are different. And also you have your non-stimulant type, which actually supports a different neurochemical. And you have to take it every day. Whereas the two types that we've just mentioned, you don't. You can take them for a day. And if they don't work for you, you can cease them. And there'll be no ill effects from that because you pee them out of your system the same day that you take them. So that's one of the reasons that sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And this is one of the reasons we really do need to get a professional who understands this even better. I mean, I've been in the room when the training's taken place. I am not a medic, so I have lots of information, but I wouldn't, for example, understand how those things interface with other medications. I can't possibly know that, but I can tell you those basics because I've been trained to do that. I've been in the room when they've had the training and I've got those slides. But I think is that helpful to know, Ryan? Do you think that's
absolutely.
Has that answered your question?
But this is another debate within itself, is the fact that the approach changes all the time. There's no consistency. And this is the big problem that I have with the education system at the moment. The lack of consistency with everything around neurodivergence, around ADHD, around autism, around how situations are handled. Another thing that I have a massive problem with is in how young people in particular get diagnosed. You know, like, again, that's another level of inconsistency because you'll have certain catchment areas, certain areas of the country that will invite you to go through the right to choose, or will have other pathways into getting some support or a diagnosis, and some areas won't have that. So to me, there's no consistency in any of it, and again, that's what's creating a lot of this misinformation and a lot of this kind of furore around it all. And again, it's such an easy problem to fix. Just make it consistent. And then, I think people would benefit from that. But, if you've got one family that aren't getting any help at all, or there's no pathway into care and help and support, and then you go across the boundaries into another area and there's a same family from a similar background that are getting that, then you're going to have division, aren't you? And that's exactly what we're experiencing right now, division.
Yeah, there should be an equity of opportunity. Yeah, there should be an equity of opportunity exactly. To access things. Yeah, absolutely that. Ryan, we've talked so much really, really good stuff, but I'm looking at the time and I'm like, gosh.
Yes.
At least you're being time conscious
about it, because I'm being time blind.
Yeah, well,
and
that's my biggest Achilles heel. That's the biggest weakness I have as an ADHD person. But I have a little clock just in front of me. Okay, so please talk about the work that you've got going on with ADHD and me. Is it you, me, and
yeah,
ADHD?
sure. It's you,
Go
me,
on.
and ADHD. We've had a whole debate around that, and I'm not going to get into it all. But Sam Thompson's just wrote a book called You, Me, and ADHD, and I hope it does really, really well. Genuinely, I was doing You, Me, and ADHD. I've been doing You, Me, and ADHD now for nearly 4 years. Very, very big part of my life. It's probably one of the most important things that I do. Basically, what You, Me, and ADHD is exactly what it says on the tin. It's you, me, and we're talking all things ADHD. Is it one of the kind of cliche, sit-down, statistical presentations? Absolutely not. It's all from raw, authentic, lived, real experience. My takes on what ADHD is, how it can manifest, how it presents itself, how it can affect your life, talking about things end game rather than, it's a superpower if you do this and it's that. And, I talk about both positives and negatives, and I'm very neutral in how I conduct it. I like to have questions and answers, but I also like to get the young people talking, really, getting their viewpoints on it. Like I mentioned earlier in this, it's scary how many young people are getting diagnosed with these labels, but they do not know what they stand for. They do know nothing about it. They don't know what the symptoms are. They don't know what's going to happen to them going forward in the future. They don't know how they're going to, how they're going to deal and approach that. So that's really what it is. It's all about my journey with ADHD. How it's been there from birth, obviously, and it's been masked. It masked a very serious heart problem that I had as a child called PDA, patent ductus arteriosus. Sounds like some kind of magic spell off Harry Potter. But yeah, basically what that is, it's an open valve in your heart. When you're born, most people's close naturally. Mine stayed open. Now, however, they're normally picked up in infancy between 0 and 2. Mine wasn't discovered till I was 4 because I didn't look like a sick child. I didn't present myself like I was poorly. Constantly moving, big energy, used to swing from curtain to curtain like Mowgli out the Jungle Book, talking excessively, acting on impulse, no sense of danger, zoning in, zoning out, every sort of ADHD symptom and scenario that you can think of happened in my
You're
infancy.
a bit of a poster boy for ADHD, aren't you, really?
Yeah, and I am the spectrum. No, I'm joking. But no, seriously, it masked this problem. And now in hindsight, looking back, which is a wonderful thing, hindsight, it masked a very serious issue. And I think there's a lot of young people that have health conditions, some more serious than others, that also maybe have undiagnosed ADHD or one of these conditions. And it has the ability to be able to do that, because how you conduct yourself on the exterior isn't always what you're feeling and going through on the interior. And people only see the outside, not the inside. So it was easy for people to sort of pass it off and be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with Ryan. He's not resting. He's not sleeping. He must be fine. He looks fine. Look, he's running around all over the place. When in reality, I was dying. And I had to have a very major heart operation when I was 4. But the problems, this is the story that I go through in the talk. And what I'm trying to say is that even after the operation, all them signs and symptoms, the recklessness, the relentlessness, the restlessness of it all still presented itself after the heart operation. So it wasn't the fact that I was poorly, why I was acting like I was. It was up here, not in here. So, but we talk a lot about masking. We talk about misunderstandings. We talk about the education system, my journey from the beginning through to the end of it, how I was predicted a U in my GCSEs, but then got taken out of mainstream education and put in an alternate provision. We talk about how they handled me and how different things were going through PRU and going through EOTAS. It's obviously learning more life skills and understanding other people's emotions and feelings and things. And we actually talked about these conditions because majority of the people that were in them provisions had these conditions. So we all talked about them, and we learned to self-educate, self-accept, make ourselves aware of these issues when the mainstream education system didn't do that. And that's what You, Me and ADHD is about. I deliver teacher training. I'll deliver talks anywhere we go. I'm actually working with the FA at the moment in developing football coaches, because there's a little bit if you come to one of my talks, if you're watching this, there's a bit in there that I talk about me as a child playing football and how misunderstood I was on the field, But I'm going to wrap this up with my analogy of what I think ADHD is. And I like to do this on these podcasts because everyone's got a different opinion on it. But truly, my analogy that I use to young people to get them understanding what ADHD is I ask them to think of a tornado. I ask them, what does a tornado do and what is a tornado? Majority of them will say it's a big gust of wind or it's an extreme weather, which it is. But ADHD is an extreme thing. Both a tornado and ADHD are natural occurrences. They come into the world completely naturally with no intentions, either good or bad. They just come into the world naturally. And in the wrong environment, they both can cause severe damage, destruction, chaos and carnage. If you put them in the right environment, then it's surplus power that can generate a lot of things. So again, environment's really, really
power
important.
that can create a lot of things. I like that.
It can create a lot of things. I mean, a lot of ADHD people are relevant to what they do. It doesn't have to necessarily be creative. They find the tenacity and the impulsivity to want to keep persevering, recreating, and keep on going. Even when they don't think that they possibly can, they will find a way to keep going from the lowest depths. And we just don't take no for an answer, do we? Let's get real.
No.
So.
Okay. Well, there is that. I think that's a good sort of place to end things, because we are quite a way over time. So it's going to be our longest episode by a little way. But
at least you're structurally keeping time, so that's good.
So that's the teacher in me, isn't it? And I've got so many things I want to ask you, but I can't. But I would love to have you back another time, because I think there is more for us to talk about. I mean, in no small terms, just about what you just saying there. So what's the answer? What's the positives? I want to talk to you about that. We can't right now, but I'm going to encourage people to follow your socials as well. I will include them in the assets for the podcast episode.
Brilliant.
Ryan, thank you very much for the whirlwind or the tornado. You have been amazing. I'm going to whirlwind out of here. No worries. Thank you. Thank you. It's been lovely to have you. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you for listening to ADHD Wise Podcast. ADHD Wise exists to help bridge understanding and support for people exploring ADHD and broader neurodiversity. If you would like to know more about us and our services, please visit www.adhdwise.uk. Follow ADHD Wise UK on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and LinkedIn. Take care, and we'll see you next time.